In a world where information seems to travel at the speed of light and traffic at a snail's pace, where the agenda of those at the helm doesn't always reflect the pressures on the streets, where the rubber hits the road, where there's queue of issues needing to be interrogated in the name of speaking truth to power.
Welcome to A Place at the Table,
where we set the agenda,
table the issues that matter to you,
and invite you to take a seat at the table.
It feels good to say, welcome to A Place at the Table. It's a new year, and what better time to tell ourselves some truths? I'll open the floor by saying it's time to work, not to pray.
We don't like to tell ourselves the truth. It's a popular Nigerian refrain. Well, not today. I'll be addressing the paradox of tipping security officials.
Nwamaka, if inspiration cannot be found within, there's certainly inspiration from without. So it's time to shift our gaze to Ghana.
We shift our gaze from within to without, and also from one generation to the next. I'll be speaking to the Gen Zs. Welcome to the table, Kelechi. I know you come with fresh lens.
Fresh lens is right, fellow Africans. The question is, how does the world see us? And most importantly, how do we see ourselves?
Now, those who have ears to hear or even eyes to see, let them pay close attention. We begin. Welcome once again. The Bible says, faith without works is dead. All Christian faithful know this Bible verse, James 2 verses 26. And we apply it very well to our daily lives. We apply it in our careers. We very well know that no matter how hard we pray, if we do not make necessary sacrifices and preparation, there's no possibility of growth in our individual careers. And so if we know this, and we know it so well, and we apply it daily, why then do we fail to apply the same principle when praying for Nigeria? How exactly do we want God to step in and solve Nigeria's national issues if we don't actually work? If we have a governor who can't read his own budget figures in Edo State, we have a governor who's been fighting his former godfather and current minister since he got into office in 2023. We have a governor who paid his children's school fees till graduation. We have a government that tells you to tighten your belt, but it never holds back when it has to spend billions on cars and houses for the executive. Nigerians, how exactly do you want God to help your country? Nigeria isn't possessed by demons. There's no demon. If we were possessed by demons, there's no demon that would survive a country having 100,000 megawatts of electricity. And a truly trusted electoral system, and a justice system that is truly blind, a justice system that we can trust. Demons can't thrive in such environments where governments invest in infrastructure and give life to entrepreneurship, where government provides security for lives and property. Demons don't thrive there. They die in such places. So you don't even need to pray for, such a nation. You don't need to pray and cast away demons in such a nation. Where do you want God to step in when your electoral system can't be trusted? Your justice system seems to favor the rich only, and you repeatedly elect the worst into political office. The biblical story of 5 bread and 2 fishes, or even the story of the widows and oil in 2 Kings 4 verses 1 to 7, it tells us that even when God is going to perform a miracle, he needs something to work with, like bread or oil. And so Nigerians, where is your bread or your fish or your oil? What type of miracle are you praying for without working for Nigeria?
There you go. Also, you have so many questions in your advocacy. First of all, let me jump into that speech by the governor who couldn't read those figures. I think it was an error from the speechwriter. I should have written in words. Because truth be told, if you gave that to me, I'll struggle with it. And yeah, so he speaks to getting competent people who know what to do. You don't write such figures, like that. You write in words. So I just read the words and then I don't embarrass myself. Having said that, you also talked about, you asked a particular question, how do you want God to save your country? Rhetorical. He saves every country, whether religious or not. Is the God over Russia? Is the God over the United States? It depends on how we use the talents that he's given us. The the natural minerals is given different countries. I disagree with you, Osa, that Nigerians
don't work.
I think we're one of the hardworking people, most hardworking people in the world. You see that each time, each time we step out of Nigeria and we go to other countries, we're most times the best in many spaces. So it's even within the country, there are a lot of us hardworking people in Nigeria. I don't think the problem is with us and the hard work, but about the people governing these set of hardworking people. And there's always a mix anyway.
Yeah, so the context is not about how hardworking in Nigeria.
I was going to say
the context is about expecting that when you do your annual fasting for Nigeria, every Sunday they say pray for Nigeria in almost every church in the country. God's own country, America, still needed to put its institutions in place. Still needed to ensure that its electoral systems were strong enough. Its institutions that catch you when you steal money. All those things are in place. And that's what makes it successfully enough to call itself God's own country, America. Nigeria doesn't have that.
Failure of institutions.
But there's something that you just did. You absolved the chief executive, his chief executive of the state, of responsibility by saying, "Oh, it was a speechwriter."
You should have practiced the speech before. You should have looked at the speech.
You practice your speech, but in public speaking, you write out the words. Both ways. I'm not absolving, but both ways. Look, I agree. This is what I don't like about Nigerians. We tend to always looking for the how to hang people in governance. Not all the time. Let's apportion blame where the blame is. Yes, the speechwriter wrote figures instead of words, but then the chief executive also should have
read the speech.
Read over and over, rehearsed.
But it's for the chief executive to deal with the person underneath, but the buck stops with him.
I think you have a point that people who work for certain institutions, like if you're working for the governor, you ought to do your work well. It's a professional thing to be a speechwriter, so we can apportion a little bit of responsibility and say he didn't do it well. Again, the chief executive officer ought to, like you just said, he ought to be, apart from rehearsing, he ought to be familiar with his own budget figures, really. He should know what the total package of his budget is, and he shouldn't have to struggle.
He should know.
I mean, even if he had said 12 trillion, and he didn't read out the words, one would have forgiven him. But there should be a level of familiarity with the budget, or his own budget.
Instead of us to do the things that ought to be done to attain excellence, we focus on just prayer, which I might say they're not mutually exclusive, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We can continue to pray, but we must do the things that we need to do.
I see it all as a call to action. Planning for the thing is not doing the thing. Praying for the thing is not doing the thing. Doing the thing is doing the thing. If our people do not come and say, what can we do to make things better? I mean, praying is good. It's a profession of faith and trying to put your dreams together and, it's a kind of advocacy. But without action, even in the Bible, they say you have to knock first before the door will be opened. You have to ask before it will be given to you. And things like that. So it's an advocacy for.
I think I think all of us, especially with what we're all going to be discussing today, we're all having the same theme, calling Nigerians to take charge of developing their nation.
Yes.
Not prayers, but everybody doing his part. Our value system, changing a lot of things. If you're a professional, be a professional. Be found to be very competent in what you do as a professional. If you are the governor, actually own that responsibility and accountability to the people that when you are coming out there, you're going to come out being actually abreast of all the information you need. So everybody just has to work to be professional. Work hard for Nigeria. Don't let us just think Nigeria is something somebody else from the top should deal with. All of us have to do our best. And he's right. We can't change a system if we, that we're supposed to be active participants, are doing nothing.
Anyway, thanks for your contributions. We all, obviously know the problems, but unfortunately, just a few are ready to roll up their sleeves and address the solutions.
Well, may we not be among the many who stand idly by while the nation deteriorates. The paradox of tipping security officials in Nigeria. It reveals a troubling reality. What may seem like a harmless gesture of goodwill or even a survival tactic actually reinforces deeper systemic failures. And this practice highlights a breakdown in accountability and fairness, compromising the integrity of the security institutions meant to protect us all. At first glance, tipping security officials may feel justified. Many argue that these officers are poorly paid and overworked, leaving them to depend on tips to make ends meet. Yet, this dependence perpetuates a cycle that goes beyond financial struggles. It weakens the very foundations of trust in law enforcement. It creates a two-tier system where those who can afford to tip are prioritized, while others are left exposed to inefficiency or outright neglect. Moreover, tipping shifts responsibility away from the government. When citizens routinely fill the gaps left by inadequate salaries or poor oversight, it allows those in power to avoid addressing systemic failures. The state grows increasingly comfortable outsourcing its responsibility to the public, leaving citizens trapped in a loop of informal payments. And this ultimately enables the government to sidestep meaningful reform. Even more concerning is how this practice normalizes corruption. What starts as a small token of gratitude often grows into outright bribery, turning acts of service into transactional exchanges. Security officials who rely on these informal payments lose their impartiality, leaving citizens questioning whether protection and justice can truly be expected, almost always be negotiated. Trust erodes, and with it, the moral authority of these institutions. Addressing this paradox begins with us. Citizens must challenge the normalization of tipping, not by condemning individual officers, but by holding the state accountable for their welfare and performance. Policymakers must step up to ensure fair wages, better working conditions, and stricter oversight for security officials. Without systemic reform, we risk perpetuating an unjust system that serves neither the citizens or all the officials it employs. Only through a collective commitment to fairness and accountability can we rebuild trust and create a system that truly works for everyone.
I'm not even sure. This feels like a chicken and egg, type of situation because we all saw a couple of days ago when the Cubana Chief Priest Burna Boy situation was happening, and one of them, was bragging, that, next week we were coming to get you out of there. We'll show who get power pass and things like that. And so that basically highlights, that there is an obvious problem with Nigeria's security agents and criminal justice system generally, where money and power gives you an edge, over, those institutions. How do these police officers even survive their everyday activities? There's almost nothing that you're going to go to report in the police station now, except maybe you go to, where Benjamin Hundeyin is, and, it's probably cleaned up in that area. But every regular police station, you need to bring money.
Yes.
Your sister has been kidnapped, you bring money. There are robbers down your street, you bring some money. You need to mobilize them. So as much as Nigerians can try to not tip, try to not fund these things, those institutions are so broken that you almost don't have a choice. You're left with either giving that money to enable them do the work that they're meant to do, or you are helpless.
It's a fundamental failure, of your security system, really. I mean, what can I say? A policeman is supposed to have moral authority over you. And if you wind down your car and the man is begging you for money, he has lost that moral authority almost instantly. And by that, yes, we have created several tiers, of policing, where those who can afford, I mean, a policeman you've been tipping over 6 months or thereabout will find it very difficult to arrest you.
Yeah.
Even if he finds incriminating material, because this man has become his benefactor. And if we look at that, it's really a very, very fundamental part of what has become the norm now. I really like your advocacy. I mean, we've normalized it, but it's absurd that this is happening,
If I may say something,
Please, yes.
I think that we are still looking at it on a bit of a surface level. There is an economy that has been built up around corruption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an economy that funds a lot of activities, so that it's so difficult to find a way to draw back from that corrupt practices. So we can't really be appealing to morality and the rest at this stage. That train has actually left the station a long time ago. So we have a systemic problem. And what I always say is that when you have bad eggs, let them live as a cohort, but don't introduce the bad characteristics and the bad things to the new cohort. So all the people that are being brought in now, there should be like the separation, like the best of officers that have proven not to be corrupt, to be their mentors, to be the ones addressing them, so that we start weeding out. Because otherwise, they will transfer the same problem.
So are you suggesting an overhaul?
We can't afford to do an overhaul because we can't. I'm even sort of thinking that a generation, almost like 3 generations, we should forget it and start working from the primary school level and start bringing back values and bringing back things, so that it's not something that we can weed out immediately. We should start.
When I think about seatbelts, when they brought seatbelts, into Nigeria as a law, like you have to wear your seatbelts. I mean, I think many of us were skeptical. Nigerians are not going to wear seatbelts. Yeah. But by the time it was enforced, at least in Lagos State, repeatedly by LASMA, Nigerians now wear seatbelts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes when there is no accountability, we assume there are no consequences for certain actions, things continue. But if we implement accountability, but after reforms, because if you're saying that your wage, we're saying the wage cannot support lifestyle.
You can't.
And you're saying don't collect money, that might be unfair. Increase the wage, do certain reforms, then impose consequences.
And truly, this is overwhelming.
Yes, it is.
A practice, because I put myself in the shoes of someone, a leader, who would want to drive change in this wise. Where do you start? I said to myself, being at the table this year, I'm going to be looking at more of solutions than just criticizing and analyzing. So how do we begin to correct this culture of tipping security officials? And when we say security officials, it's not just the police.
No.
We're talking of the customs.
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody, the entire security apparatus in Nigeria. So how do we begin to right the wrongs of many generations? I hear you say, let's start from primary school. I hear you say, okay, let's flush some people away and bring in some people.
Say we should.
But how easy will that be? So basically, I think, and then again, don't forget that the culture of giving and showing gratitude is embedded in our culture. So we have to take away the cultural part of it and look at it from a governance perspective. I hear you when you say federal road safety, it's very different. Getting me to use a skill is different from getting me to stop the habit of asking for Oga, how far now? Your boys are here. It's a very different thing entirely. How do I stop this man? And it happens to all of us. How do I stop you? And you're right, you give them more money, it's not going to stop. So it's both attitudinal and even more than that. So we begin to look at how do we change the mindset, the thinking that this is not right, this is not done abroad. And when our policemen go abroad to be part of any project, they don't do that.
Giving that policeman a tip is a bribe.
Yeah.
It's not a tip.
It's a bribe.
It's a law officer. So we are making it sound easy. Nigerians are bribing police officers on a daily basis for nothing, just turning them into a charity situation. Any policeman that accepts 1 naira, 5 naira from anybody is accepting a bribe. It's a very grievous offense.
Where survival mode shortens our lifespan, isn't it time we made up our minds to actually start living?
Yes, indeed, especially when we look to our neighbor who's setting a good example. Surely then we have no excuse. A gaze at Ghana. This week, Ghana is in the news. A new president has just been inaugurated. A West African country, one of Nigeria's fiercest football competitors. The rest being Cameroon and Senegal, of course, but I digress. Even before the peaceful elections in December, Ghana and the new president held a fascination for me. Here is why. Few months after my podcast, My Period Stories, finished airing on Africa Magic Family, a man contacted me from Ghana requesting that I come with the sanitary pad media campaign. He was ready to be my coordinator and he had done a mapping of the schools he needed us to focus on. I was fascinated. I promised to collaborate with those on ground for effective, seamless operations. But a few weeks after, he wrote me again. He told me I may not need to come again because their former president, who was back to contest for the presidency, had unveiled a proposed plan for menstrual health in Ghana. I was ecstatic. In his election manifesto launched in August 2024, Ghana's new president, John Mahama, promised 3 policy actions on menstrual health that impacts education. 1, the distribution of free sanitary pads to girls in basic and senior high schools nationwide. 2, the establishment of a menstrual pad bank under the Ghana Education Service from the national to the district level. And the 3rd one, scrapping of tax on imported menstrual pads to make it affordable. And there were actually clips of the president specifically speaking to these during his campaign. Ghana's school dropout rate is reported to be higher among girls than boys at the basic level. Now, here is the crux. The essence of governance is to improve the welfare of the people. And President Mahama touched the heartstrings of his people with those thoughtful proposed policy shifts. Little wonder he won the election. I hope that 2 prominent female legislators in the Ghanaian parliament that I know, Honorable Abla Zifa Gomashi and Honorable Comfort Do Kujo Gansa, are the forefront of campaigning for free menstrual pads for schoolgirls, amongst other prominent advocates in Ghana, will hold the president accountable in his first 120 days in office. Congratulations, Ghana.
Please, can I say something that stuck out to me in all this? Yeah. That the young man came back to tell you not to bother.
Yes, he did.
But, he didn't collect your money.
No. He was genuinely interested. In fact, as I said, he had done the mapping. Come to these parts of Ghana and this part in Ghana. And I have a Ghanaian friend who's really quite, a journalist. And I, sampled her opinion. She said, oh, yes, that's true. This is Eastern Ghana. This is, Yes. I found it, the thrill in what he wrote to me, that don't even bother. Our next president is going to do this, is going to do that. It just shows how you can connect with the people even before you get there. You make your manifesto so touchable, so relatable that people don't have any choice but to vote for you. So I was following the Ghanaian elections, and when the new president won at that time, I was like, I wasn't expecting anything less, because a lot of people are on this table, as we say in Nigeria. Many people can't afford to buy menstrual pads because the price is so way high. So imagine if you have 5 girls in secondary school, how are you going to do it? The pad budget alone. So this stands out to me incredibly. And I look forward to what's going to happen in Ghana. This way, they're going to be leading in West Africa and indeed Africa, if the president can lift this and make it actionable.
And if it was men, this would be in Nigerian budget. If it was men that needed sanitary pads, I don't think it's true.
There isn't even any mention of this kind of issue in the Nigerian. I mean, I don't know if
in Nigeria's
actually
electoral conversations generally, campaign conversations, and that's the thing that stood out for me is the fact that John Mahama. I mean, you can say what you want about Nana Akufo-Addo. You know, he had his faults. He wasn't maybe the best president Ghana had, but for a president to leave everything, you've left education, you've left healthcare, you've left infrastructure, aviation, everything, and you go to sanitary pad for girls. It tells you how much attention that president has paid to every single detail and quality of life that he wants to give to the average Ghanaian. It tells you the quality of conversation that they're having when they're campaigning for elections. In Nigeria, you would not hear anything close to this.
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about. Any of the conversations. And if a president dares say anything like this, he will be mocked.
religious.
Yes.
They will laugh at him.
religious
The misogyny that would flood the conversations in the next couple of days would make you sick.
So is this about us or about the people governing?
I mean, I'm celebrating John Mahama, you know, and of course, again, the quality of conversations that they would have. And I wish him well. I think it's the second time, your second time as, as president. I'm just highlighting the quality of conversations that they are having in Ghana that we call our little brother.
Yes.
Comparing it to with the things we talk about here. Edo State governor did not campaign. She asked just now. He couldn't campaign.
Yes.
Which is why his first public speech was, you know.
He wouldn't be able to. He doesn't understand.
Yeah, that's why it's passionate.
He doesn't understand what you are saying. These people don't understand what you're saying when you're telling them about menstrual cycles and, you know, the fact that, you know, there's period poverty in Nigeria. They don't, what are you talking about?
Right.
It's not relevant to them. And so when you expect that person now would give you an improved quality of life, he doesn't know, he's not thinking on that level, that delicate level. You know, all he needs to do is shopping, campaign, and dance.
I am going to have a slightly different view or perspective. It's a little bit, I find talking about sanitary pads and everything from the president a bit too granular for me, because we've got 36 states and we've got 36 state governors. And I think issues of health care and such things belong really, really to the state. You see, the federal system that we operate, the federal government is just, when it comes to issues where the state governors also have legitimate rights to legislate upon and to act upon, that's the exclusive legislative is solely for the federal government. And what they do at the level of health are policy decisions. These are the kind of policies that we want all the 36 states to have. And we're going to help you out by setting up the standards you're expected to meet. But your states are the ones that are supposed to actually focus. So if I have a governor talking about sanitary details, I would be okay that he understands the problems of his own people. Yeah. But at that level, the federal government should not really, really now be saying that. I don't know if Ghana operates a unitary system, which might make it within his purview to talk about. But I'm not taking away from Mahama, because it means that he listened to the people on. They did a lot of research to know what are the real problems of the people. In the North, because I was in one of a survey for some global partnership in education and international institution once, and we had a lot of sanitary pad discussion, and it was even part of some of the grants that were given to be able to get young girls to come to school. One of the other things was toilet facilities. A lot of other things, toilet facilities.
So I was going to, you mentioned that it's a healthcare issue.
Yeah.
But the president is supposed to look at policy issues that are big enough. Now, if the president can talk about feeding in schools, why can't he talk about sanitary pads?
Because it's something when it impacts education.
Hold on a second. That's right in my field,
it is repeated and periodic. And when you talk about healthcare, it is you know, it's not healthcare in terms of people falling ill. This is quality of life.
Yes. So what I would say is, well done, Ghana. Well done already, President Mahama. Keep up the good work. May we see ourselves as trailblazers rather than those who go with the flow.
Funke, it's like you've taken my script and are speaking to the Gen Zs. My advocacy is a challenge to the Generation Z, popularly called Gen Zs, to lead the way in change for good governance. We cannot all be involved in government, but we can all be involved in governance. Government refers to the individuals who govern, while governance is the broader framework of processes, structures, institutions, and interactions that shape a country's political landscape. This complexity underscores the need for Nigerians to comprehend and engage in governance actively. The Gen Zs, born between 1997 and 2012, hold a pivotal position to lead the vanguard for advocating for good governance. As opposed to the millennials, that generation that lived through the rise of the internet while still growing up with cable television and landline phones, Gen Zs are the first true digital native generation. Most of them do not remember life before smartphones, and all have grown up during a time of immense access to streaming content and social media. Their involvement in government is essential, in governance is essential to improve governance metrics such as upholding the rule of law, fostering democratic principles, and demanding accountability from government. Their familiarity with the digital technology equips them to mobilize peers, as evidenced by their participation in movements like the 2020 NSAS protests. However, effective governance reform requires more than demonstrations. It necessitates a deep understanding of governance structures and systematic engagement within these frameworks. To facilitate meaningful change, my challenge to Gen Zs is to infiltrate governance institutions by taking the following actions. 1, join political parties. Membership in a political party is essential for those aspiring to occupy positions with government. 2, become delegates. Engage in party processes to influence delegate selection, because this shapes the candidates that are put up for elections. 3, pursue legal awareness and knowledge. Gain knowledge of the law to avoid misconceptions that hinder effective activism, and pursue being informed and ready for discussions with the older generations who may challenge their views. 4, grassroots experience. Accumulate experience through community organizations and consider seeking local elected positions to understand governance dynamics better. 5, engage elected officials. Utilize technology to foster interactions with elected representatives across all levels, not just at the federal level. As Gen Z continues to push for change, they must also acknowledge the impending arrival of Generation Alpha, emphasizing the need for them to substantially have accomplishments that are beyond mere agitation.
Well, I agree with your advocacy, and I believe that some of that has already begun, because after the NSAS movement, 2023 elections showed a lot of involvement of the Gen Zs. And I think that at the end of the day, they might not have been very excited about the results, even though in some areas they pushed change and they drove a lot of change this time around. The challenge, I think, might be that there are gatekeepers in the system. And we have a system that is an anti-system running as the main system. And being able to decode what that anti-system is, in other words, there are things on paper that are supposed to be the rules and how things work, then there's the way things work. They're not the same. And understanding how those things that are working in the wrong way actually work, 1. 2, how do we stop that and remove the gatekeepers is the problem. Because the gatekeepers frustrate and stifle the Gen Zs coming in. And that I do not have a solution to, but I see that as the problem. And, you know, understanding that the gatekeepers are gatekeepers for a purpose. There's a treasure that they're keeping, that they do not want others to have access to, or they're keeping it for themselves and it shouldn't be for the masses. So that is the challenge I believe that we have. Sponsoring people in training in public service is one of the solutions that I think, that's the Gen Zs. Getting them to be interested, but also sponsoring them Like you mentioned, they should understand how government works. How do we engage? You know, very, very good points that you put up there. But beyond that, how do we reconcile what is on paper and what is actually happening?
I love your advocacy. I mean, what can I say? The Gen Zs are between 17 and 35 or something.
I mean, these 28
these are like 30% to 35% of Nigeria's population. I mean, the median age is 17. It's a very powerful group if they understand their power. They are digital natives, which means they understand this new world of internet, but they are also perpetually distracted by the world that they are in.
That's right.
You know, we're living at a time where it has never been easier to do nothing.
Precisely.
You see, from my own generation, we woke up when, we grew up when it is by 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock that NTA will open. And by 12 it's over. You go to bed. There's nothing else to do until they open again. So you're bored. You have to go out, play football, or read a book, or do something else. Right now, we have what is called doom scrolling. Now, the interesting thing about it is that it's a double-edged sword. It hasn't been easier to do nothing, that you just stay and binge on Netflix and things, but it hasn't also been easier to blow, as the Gen Z people would call it. All you needed to do was to put your skill together, publicize it on whatever social media platform. You can actually start getting paid by anybody you deliver such services to, if it's digital, globally. You know, and what I've seen, if we wanted to see the power of the Gen Zs, it was a real shocker for the people in power during the NSAS. And they spoke out and they spoke up, you know. But their main problem, and it's not restricted to them, is every Nigerian that has that problem, is this lack of
Focus.
Unity. Unifying against all odds and being able to be able to fight for your principles and, well, die for it.
I love your advocacy. I love the fact that you're pointedly telling Gen Zs to get off X and start being useful. I mean, get practical, be pragmatic in the real world. In the first instance, I remember Not Too Young to Run. It was a vision. At what point did they drop the ball and resorted to, you know, venting on X? I think they should go back to that vision and run with it again. Thirdly, the next point I want to make is about the hashtag NSAS. It's a watershed in and a symbolic development about the ability of Nigerian youth to organize. They organized, they did it well. How come they cannot organize to penetrate governance and actually be participants, not at the sides, jeering and hailing A or B, but that they be practically within to effect change. Having said that, you highlighted 5 things that you expect them to do. While you were talking about it, the first thing that came to my mind was how. How is it going to be possible? How easy is it to join a political party in Nigeria? If it's very simple, we need it to be out there. So we need to step up our civic education and awareness. How easy is it to become a delegate? I mean, when the critical decision was to be made at Eagle Square for the APC, it was only the delegates. All of us were watching and there was absolutely nothing we could do. So how do you then become a delegate? How long does it take you to become a delegate? Again, pursue legal awareness, knowledge, and grassroots experience. I know quite a number of our Gen Zs are into community interventions here and there, but what we are saying, and to support your advocacy, is that you begin to organize along political lines. You begin to think again about the Not Too Young to Run. There are cases of people who are, I mean, young people who are in governance already, but we want more of you. And the only way that you can effect change is to be a critical mass within and not without.
I mean, critical mass is important. from previous generations, the Nigerian government has always found its way to override the interest of, of the majority. Our parents, fought against the military. It got to our stage, of course, we got to use the internet to come together. Government also figured out its way. The gatekeepers, like you said, they figured out a way to also bypass, that coming together. The Gen Zs, generation Beta, I think they're coming next. The Nigerian government, as long as these gatekeepers exist, will always figure out a way to beat those systems. They might be threatened a little bit, but they will figure out a way around it. Coming together is most important, but there has to be something that if in America or in Russia, for example, the Russians will brag that you can never defeat them. Right, and that's right from the Second World War all the way down till now, till today. They would fight this current war with Ukraine till the very last blood, but they would vow that you can never defeat them because there's a spirit inside of them. The young Nigerian doesn't seem to have that thing, and that's why you can easily just be split with Yoruba, Igbo. That's all they need to throw in there, They just need to throw it in there. And all of your gatherings, the whole Congress that you put together, all of them register, 2 million of them, they break it in one weekend. Yes. Just by throwing in one Yoruba versus Igbo thing.
Organize politically, penetrates, read my lips, penetrates, and grab power. Nobody's going to give it to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Funke. Perhaps it's a case of the last shall be the first. Certainly, the race ahead of us can't be run by old and tired legs like mine.
Position ourselves by way of a generational shift. Permit me to present a fresh perspective to match. Okay, my advocacy is to talk about we Africans. How do we see ourselves and how the world sees us? The predominantly negative impression of the African continent, the first seeds of negative impression were planted by outsiders who came to plunder the continent. They came to take what belongs to us. Through violence and savagery, they robbed and pillaged not just the material things, but the very culture and principles of the people of Africa. Your language was called vernacular, your religion was called animist, you were called primitive, and your entire civilization was called savage. Now, over 50 years after independence, these seeds of negativity are being nurtured by NGOs and several African countries desperate to attract foreign aid. In a bid to impress their donors, they need to make the most gory, exaggerated images of suffering, violence, basically all the things that were being said about Africa by the initial colonial masters who came to pillage the continent. In addition, the entire global Western media persists in showing predominantly negative impressions of the continent. Famine, Boko Haram, terrorism, poverty, bad governance, corruption, basically saying that we as Africans are not capable of running our own affairs. Even the film industry would churn out several movies like Blood Diamond, that depict Africans as savages. However, in recent times, we have started to see some gradual pushback on this narrative. Our film industry in Nigeria managed over the years to push a positive impression of the continent by telling a variety of African stories that border on who we truly are. Our music industry had been amplified through the various digital platforms. They have been breaking several records across the world. Through the power of digital distribution, our films have started making inroads into the global discourse. The social media had been populated by an overwhelming flood of positive images of the new Africa and Africans. We must become deliberate in redesigning the essence of who we are as Africans. Bob Marley said, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. The most difficult prison to escape from is the one in one's head." Our people must work to change the way they see themselves and change the narrative from within.
Be intentional about telling a different story, what you're saying, and we have to decide what story we want to tell.
We have to be deliberate.
I remember going to the American Embassy in Toronto early 2000. I needed to get a visa. And when I got to the window, and the visa officer saw my Nigerian passport. She was like, "Oh, I love Nollywood movies." This was like year 2000. I was so shocked.
It's powerful.
You know, those days when they used to have those big houses in Ajawa Estate that were recording. You find out that stories influence a perception of a people and a culture by others who have not directly interacted with it. Think about Nigerians who would do all sorts of things to get to America for the American dream. They wouldn't mind crossing deserts, you know, to get to Europe, and they've never been there before.
It's unbelievable.
It's from the movies that they watch.
It's the advocacy of, you see, the thing is that it's just stories. What stories are inside your head about who you are yourself? So in this advocacy, I'm talking about how we see ourselves
First of
as
all,
opposed to how others also see us. Because it is us that will then show the rest of the world. The Nollywood people, the early days of Nollywood, when Alaba Boys were sponsoring, is those CDs. Look, I photographed this Miss Liberia. I'm talking about 20 years ago. She came to my studio and she was looking through my computer. She saw Ramsey and I said, "Oh, Ramsey, no, he has 4 children and one is in this." I said, "Huh?" He said, "Oh, look at Motola. Oh, you know, in 19 this." I was like, "You know these people more than myself." He said, "Kelechi, you don't understand. When we were fighting our civil war, your Nollywood movies gave us hope. It is your Nigerian movies that made us see black people riding Rolls Royce.
Free,
We never imagined such scenarios because they don't get shown in Western movies."
Right.
But how do you draw a line between, I mean, I completely agree with, you know, telling a different story about Africa and about Nigeria. But how do you also draw the line between wanting to tell a different story and also painting a false narrative, you know, about you know where we are? Because it's almost like putting makeup on a pig. If you remember the Dirty December, there's this lady, American, I believe, who we left and then, you know, wrote on her social media platform about how beautiful Nigeria is. But as much as it is a beautiful place to party and to enjoy December, she could still see the poverty that was just surrounding.
I can answer that question. The American dream is a contrivance.
Yeah.
It was intended to be aspirational.
Yeah.
We can choose what we amplify.
Yeah.
Go to LA.
Yeah.
Homeless population is extremely high. Go to the streets of Philadelphia, North Philadelphia. There are people strung out on drugs in broad daylight, high. You don't see that.
Zombies.
Internationally, no. So we're not saying lie, but they're the good things. You choose what you amplify, and what you amplify grows because it affects the perception of your people and affects the perceptions of other people, and we will move towards that amplification.
I'm going to jump in and I'm going to just summarize what I thought I heard from you in your advocacy, and it's this, that the power of storytelling can change the African narrative, and how NGOs perpetuate the colonial perception of primitiveness in order to access funds. That's the essence of what the advocacy is about. I am thrilled about the binaries you started with, outsiders, insiders, to plunder, to nurture. You talked about the language. English is superior, yours is vernacular. You talked about religion, that's where the primitiveness comes in. And then you talked about savages. I can't remember what you said before that. But you see, these words jump at me because in storytelling, these are the words that define our identities, that define the perception you've talked about. And I want to join you and Nwamaka also in applauding Nollywood. When I schooled in South Africa, there was a spring to our steps when we heard Nigerian music. And quite a number of people abroad, the rest of the world, you know, listen to a lot of Nigerian music. We are changing the narratives with storytelling in the movies and the music. But you see, the storytelling within has to change as well. Are we, and I think traditional media, legacy media is doing a lot of this, are we telling the stories as realistically as possible? And in telling the stories, what solutions are we looking for? You have singled out the NGOs to say, you're helping our colonial masters to perpetuate this perception
reinforce.
that we are still where we are. We used to be. You should stop, you know. And I think legacy media is doing a lot also to change that.
Can I also jump in to say that in all this, we look at what the government can do or is doing to even help change our narratives. We have a minister of culture that and creative economy, such fanciful, that is not even at the level that we're talking about. I mean, Dirty December, I don't think there was anything to promote Nigeria
organic.
using that. It's just organic.
Yes.
It's just organic. We have the same problems.
A huge concert.
Yes.
Because they bought into it.
They bought into it.
okay.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's okay. But was the concert in Lagos or Abuja?
it was in Lagos.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, so we need to have them move this into like a cultural thing. I talked about the one, I think some time ago, I referred to the one in Ogun State. That thing that Ojude Oba or something, Ojude Oba. You know, there's so many of such things that we should encourage to show that Nigeria is not this crazy place. It's something that can drive economy, our culture, national theater, you know. We grew up, I'm sorry, we grew up in a theater-going era.
Yes.
I mean, we loved all these Death and the Kingsmen, Ogunde, Wole Soyinka. In University of Air, we had Ori Olokun Theater. I mean,
Baba Salah.
Yeah, Baba Salah, you know. And we need to use those things again to drive our economy, to drive tourism into Nigeria. And I just think it's an advocacy for government also to see what people are doing organically and to actually jump into it and help.
I'm curious to know what Osa is thinking in this wise. You think this is a government thing or people-driven thing, this storytelling?
It's both, actually. I think the mentality is what needs to change. Government needs to understand, I mean, when they talk about how Hollywood is greatly influenced by the CIA, because they are intentional about how they want America to be seen. They're intentional about the narrative, the propaganda that they want to sell. So yes, the government has its role to play. If it has to give investment support, if it has to give some level, whatever level of support, infrastructure support, to the Ministry of Tourism, to the creative, economy, like you've said. Yeah, the government has its role to play. The Nigerian people also have their own role to play. We should not only believe that it's the sickening stories that sell, the best. They're great stories to tell.
That's right.
He does phenomenal with photography. They're great pictures, of Nigeria that should be taken. Not the one of the crying baby in the market with her mother on her mother's back.
But I would
that's
say
not.
there's something going on which is just phenomenal, as far as I'm concerned. In Lagos and spreading to other parts of the country, young photographers and image makers are creating amazing content about contemporary Nigerian culture, mixing it so you can have just every 40th, 20th, 30th birthday has a pure editorial shoot with makeup, hair, fashion. Value chain. Wedding is a different thing.
Wedding planning.
Right now, somebody told me I need to go and investigate it. There are now Nigerian themed weddings.
Yes, abroad. I saw one by Americans.
And people get tickets and have ashrabi made for them.
And the money being paid to Nigerian stylists and Nigerian designers
to create.
You see two Oyibo people doing a Yoruba wedding.
I've seen one of recent. I saw one of recent. I even promoted it on Twitter.
To Nigeria.
Just taking the culture. I even had to tag the Minister of Creative Economy, seeing two white people having a Nigerian themed wedding in America.
I need to put this in. I think it's important that we remember, we're on News Central, and that's part of, I believe News Central is also to change the African narrative. So us being on the place at the table is part of that, where we're showing a different side of Nigeria. And I think a lot of people are doing that as well now. And it's great. If we just continue, each of us would work on that, I think we'll go places.
Okay. All right. A new year, new ways of seeing and doing, or perhaps just doing what we already know to do. Thank you for joining us at the table. Make it a date. Same time next week for more change, provoking discussions. Till then, it's goodbye from all of us.
Adios.
Bye.
Bye-bye.